lazyfluency podcast へようこそ。お互い英語と日本語を切り替えながらカジュアルな会話を通して皆さんと一緒に言語を学んでいきます。あゆみです。
And I'm Joey.
そして今日のテーマは N1 の後の言語学習。その前にいいね、チャンネル登録、フォローまで聞いているプラットフォームでレビューもお願いします。コーファイでのサポートもよろしく。それでは今日のテーマ N1 の後の言語学習。
It's the first language focused video in a while, and this video was actually inspired by a long-time Discord supporter and or own YouTuber of their own, Region Unlocked, who released a video I think called Japanese is Hard and That's Fine, where he discusses his language learning journey and in specifics how a lot of specifically the Japanese language sphere is based around kind of like content is based around framing Japanese is not only easy, but something that you like need to learn as fast as possible. And his videos, you know, the exact opposite of that, showing a more, I think, realistic and pragmatic language learning journey. But something that I was thinking about when I was watching this video is Japanese has, I think we mentioned this a little in the podcast, but Japanese has this thing where because the JLPT exists, and it's like the government releasing, it's probably, I don't know, obviously like with TOEIC, I don't know who does that. I think it's a general European standard, but the JLPT is in a situation where it's like, it's the one country that's very isolated. You know, if you learn English, there's a lot of different English. One country is very isolated, and the government of that country has a very specific test, and the specific test is specific levels. And because of that structure, the whole notion of like the N1, passing the N1 is like the achievement that everybody needs to rush to in the sphere of learning Japanese. And and then obviously, but at the point that you reach the N1, hypothetically, your Japanese learning still continues. And so today I want to talk about like what it actually looks like and pragmatically the whole notion of like how I feel about this weird system that the Japanese language finds itself to be in. In terms of English, obviously, because I didn't learn Japanese, I'm curious if at any point, obviously you've been more like, obviously I'd say like the Japanese discussion is very online in some ways, but did you have any specific target or goal when you were taking, because you've taken the, was it TOEIC or did
No,
you take?
英検。
英検。
まあ、あれはその学校で全体的にみんなでやろうねみたいな感じだったっていうのもあって、そうね、私は英検しか受けてないけど。
But you haven't had what's it called? I know you said there's some ideas if you get above this score or that score.
ああ、まあそうね。うん。私最終的に英検準級を高校、何年だっけね。1か2年に取ったんだよね。で、その後はもうそれで取って終わりみたいな感じだったけど。うん。
So there's no, you don't like with you language. I think this might be more normal, honestly, with like most other non-Japanese languages. But you frame like if you were to make your language learning in a graph in terms of your progress or you know the speed at which you're learning, how would that graph look like? For example, a lot of Japanese learners, I think in their mental image, it's like the N1 is like pyramid of like you're trying to get to whatever the idea of passing the N1, and so it's like this hyper, super insane. I think I don't know if you have any idea. Like people are like, I skipped drinking water and food, and I engaged.
いや、全然そんなことない。わかんない。At least for me ね。
Yeah.
そもそも受験をしないといけなかったからね。大学受験しないといけなかったから、みんなそれぞれの教科の勉強してて、だからもう数学もやるし、理科もやるし、英語もやるし、みたいな感じで、で、その英語の勉強をしてて、で、まあ、ついでに取るか、みたいな感じで、取った感じ。だから、別にこの英検を取るためだけに、まあ、specifically にちょっと、力を入れるっていうことは、なかったけど、まあでも完全にないとは言い切れんくて、その英検には独特の、なんていうの、多分一級とかだとよりね、その普段こんな単語使わないよみたいな。なんかよく YouTube でも英検一級を、なんだっけ、ネイティブが受けてみたいみたいな感じで、こんな言葉見たことないんだけど、みたいな感じの言葉全然あったりして、だからそういう単語をちょっとはまあ知っておいた方がいいから単語帳買ったりとかはするけど、でも文章を読むとかだったら全然別に 英検のためだけに勉強はしなくてもいいからっていうのはあったかも。
So you don't have any, or do you have any milestones that you like, mental milestones for Japanese in your English learning? Like, here's where I officially accomplished this or got to this level. I will say, like, Japanese discussion is extremely JLPT centric. It's like all around the N5, like this N5 and 4 and 3 and 2 1. And so people frame all their journeys. Like, I know when I was at the N2 level. Like, I think if you don't have that framework, you could be like, oh, this is the first time, I don't know, I had a conversation with a random person or whatever. But in Japanese, this is when I reached N5. But what's that? Well, you have to, you know if you know.
あるね。確かに。私が学校にいた時は英検が結構中心にあったけど、今はTOEIC とか TOEFL の方があれなのかな。しかも英検もなんかシステムちょっと変わったりして、今はどうか知らんけどさ。ね。まあでも、少なくとも私の時は、
I'm not talking about just a test. I'm saying outside of, like, if tests were a big signal for you in terms of your English progress, then yeah, I'm interested in that. But I'm wondering like, in terms of big key language learning goals or moments where you're like, I've made a lot of progress. Do you have
あるある。そう、だから、準1級取ったらすごいよねっていうのはあった。で、よく履歴書とかに資格を書くところがあるんだけど、まあ、その資格は何でもいいんだけどね、自動車免許もなんか、書いていい場合とかも全然あってね。で、その履歴書に書ける資格としての英検は、まあ大体準1級以上とかなんよね。なんか2級と。
So you're just not allowed to put it on your...
なんていうのは別に、全然すごくなくないっていうだけで、2級なんか普通になんか、別に勉強しなくても取れるし、みたいな。
Okay.
だから。
勉強しなくても Okay. I'll tell you that that doesn't exist in the Japanese context. Yeah, you can just take the N4 if you haven't really studied any Japanese.
なんか2級そんな難しくなかった。
Well, no, obviously because Japanese has English education to some degree. But I'm just saying if you took, it doesn't matter how easy the test is. You take my mom, and make her take any level of Japanese test, even like just the hiragana ha or whatever. It's just going to be a 0%. That's my point.
いや、まあ、そうね。だから、その履歴書にとかでマイルストーンはあるかな。
I mean, there's so many things that came
とか、あとまだトーフル、わかんない、トーイックだけどどっちか忘れたけど、なんだっけ、900点以上がすごいみたいなのあるじゃん、なんか。なんかそれとかも、数字として現れるからさ。
And when you, is there a point where, I guess you never specifically had a point where you were, how should I say, changing like you went from a super study mode to not study mode. And like in terms of like I said, in the Japanese language learning graph, I feel like it's like this insane, like online, it's like hours spent learning Japanese, and it's just like this huge thing. And then you hit N1, and then what happens after that? Nobody knows what happens after, and we'll talk about that in a second, but I'm just curious.
私が資格JLPT とか、多分私次取るとしたら、TOEFL とか TOEIC とかなんだろうけど、なんか、言い方悪いかもしれないけど、別に高みを目指してなかったから、取ろうとも思ってなかったから勉強してないし、でもすごいそういうの取る人って、単語帳とか問題集とかめちゃめちゃやり込んで、ネイティブでも使わないような言葉を覚えたりして、で、多分底なしの、沼みたいな感じで永遠に続くんだろうね。
Well, I'm talking less about like tests. It's just the fact that in Japanese, the JLPT are used as like general progress markers for students. But I'm not as concerned about like test Japanese. I'm just saying in a Japanese learning context, it's really like you reach the end. Like if you look online discussion, people, I'm N1, so blank, I'm N1, so blank, and people frame language learning as if it's over when it's N1, and you've done all that you need to do to accomplish. By the way, before I want to talk about realistically what I believe, like from my experience, what that actually looks like and how much Japanese have you actually achieved after N1. But I will mention, just because it's notable, I have met one Japanese person before who I would say is like the chronically online version of an American NEET who's trying to learn Japanese and spending all their time, whatever. And it was so bad. Like this person had so much of their identity tied to like being a native English speaker. I think he became a monk. Like he talked
何の
to-
文句何教
So I
の
was
文
actually
句
teaching. I was teaching him
何
English.
教文句
I don't know. I was teaching him English and like tutoring him at the time. And I remember one time, like there was a huge break between we spoke one time and spoke again. And then he spoke and then he's like, do you want to meditate with me? Like I'm me and meditate for 9 hours a day. Do you want to meditate with me for 3 hours? And I was like, what in the world happened? Like what in the world happened between when we last talked and now? And he basically, I'm not entirely sure, but it seemed like when I asked him, I'm like, why do you want to learn English? And it's like, oh, it's to show off, like specifically.
To show off.
He literally, it wasn't, he didn't even say like, oh, because I like what I was like, no, it's to show off as a status marker because that's important. And I was like, I've never heard anybody just be so blatant about that. What?
なんか
Yeah.
プライド高そう
Yeah,
なん
no,
か
this
あ
really
と
was.
てかそんなにあれだったらそんなにネイティブになれなかったらさなんか他の国に住んだ方がよくない
I don't know. But it's to show off the Japanese people. That's my point. Like, you can't show off your English
で一
abilities.
回その勉強するために留学行ってそこで何年か住んでで上達した状態で日本帰ってきた方がショーオフにならない
I mean, I'm just saying. Apparently, this meant whatever happened. He needed to become a monk to decide. I don't know what the person's doing now, but
I don't want to be friends with him
anyway. So I just had to tell that little story. But okay, in terms of does your Japanese language learning journey end when you reach the N1 level? I don't know what the equivalent of that be for English, but not at all. And I think from something you read online for most people is that the N1 is where a lot of people feel that their Japanese learning actually begins. And I'm not trying to downplay like the achievement of the N1. I remember like my experience like passing the N1 and how exciting that was. But I will say what really I think is meant by this is at the N1 level, you're actually able to start engaging with native content in a non-trivial sense. And this is maybe harder to relate with English. I feel like maybe it is easier to relate with English. I don't know. But for Japanese, there's just specifically, I think a lot of because of the writing, you just really, like I said, you can go through like even the college I went to. People can go take Japanese every year of college, and at the end of college, they can, with the help of a dictionary, get through a kids manga. And that's like that doesn't feel like a huge achievement.
まあキッズ漫画がどういうのか知らんけど
Well, like I don't know. I'm saying like they can
絵
read.
本ってこと
No. I mean, like they can struggle to read through Dragon Ball with a dictionary at their side. And that's not, but if you take like 4 years of Spanish, you're reading Spanish poetry from the, whatever, or you're reading these big things. So I don't know if you have a specific relationship with that, but I'm saying with Japanese, I feel like what the N1 really marks is you're actually starting to be able to engage with whatever your interest is, whether that be light novels or non-trivial manga. And it's not that you won't be able to, you don't have to use a dictionary because you still do for quite a while. But it's the fact you're able to do so in a way that you're actually able to start enjoying things. So I think a lot of people oversimplify that and they say, oh, then you just start, at that point you can enjoy what you want. But from my perspective, it was less that and more so you are able to start actually enjoying the things outside the context of just being a learning resource, if that makes sense. Do you remember when that point was you for English at all? Like when you went from basically, did you ever engage with English as intentionally as an educational tool? Like my level is not up to, like I want to do this thing, but my level is not good enough. So I'm only, for example, breaking a video down to smaller pieces or engaging with English. It's, or anything like that. Or with you, was it always like, was it so far long ago that you don't remember? Like when you actually started, the difference between you engaging English for study and engaging with English for enjoyment. At some point, you probably won't be able to watch English television. I'm wondering if you remember that time.
まあエンジョイしてたかともう学ぶだけを
Yes, when it shifted more into the enjoy territory.
いやでもだから好きっていうかなんて言うんだろうになったきっかけがそのフレーズが面白いなと思ってよくなんかあるじゃんpronoun っていうの pronoun じゃないか
You talking about he, she?
いや違うpronoun 違う pronoun じゃないわ proverb か
Proverbs
ってなんだっけ
ことわざ
ことわざとか、あと、なんか、ワードと、動詞、例えば動詞と、助動詞を組み合わせて、こういう言い方あるんだとか、ちょっと今パッと思いつかないけど、なんかスペシフィックワンが、なんかね、面白い言い方があったりとか、なんかそういうところで、面白い、すごい興味持ったし、で、結構学校で、一応テストはあったんよね。単語テストだったり、言い回しのテストだったり、そういうのもあって、勉強しないといけなかったのはあるんだけど、でも、そういう時でも、こういう言い方あるんだと思って、めちゃめちゃ楽しかったから、勉強はしてたけど、でも勉強とあんまり思ってはなかったかも。
Yeah, I think your language learning, you had too healthy of a language learning experience. If you didn't want to become a monk at some point because you were stressing out yourself too much.
あとそうだ、発音とかも面白いなと思って、ね、発音記号とかいろいろあるじゃん。だから、もう電子辞書でめっちゃ、なんか音声こうやって調べて、他の言い方ないかなとか、あと、音声をして、なんか一緒に真似してみたりとか、CD があったから CD でその文章を読ませて、それをちょっとシャドーイングしたりとかみたいな。
Okay, so I think the other thing is with you, music was one of the primary things you were interested in. And music is something that even if you don't know any of the lyrics, you can still enjoy. The thing with like anime or light novels or reading of any degree is you can't just like nod your head to the rhythm of a novel, whatever that means. You can't just open the pages and go, so you enjoy it. So you have to like.
日本語勉強してるときストレスには感じてた？
No, it's not about stress. It's about using it as there was a point where I remember when I bought this is when I wasn't really studying for N2, but like that was a test around the level, and I bought what is this in English it's called snafu, in Japanese like yahari ore no seishun double kome wa machigatte iru. And I remember getting that. I think that might not have been the first one. I think Spice and Wolf, Okami Toko Shinryo was the first time I bought like a light novel explicitly. But I remember getting through, I think the one I was reading first was the Snafu, and reading the opening page, which is like this manifesto of the main character. And at that point, when I was reading it the first time, it was like, almost like line by line. I was scanning for meaning. And so it was enjoyment, but I'm saying I wasn't able to fully like immerse myself into the work because it was more difficult than I wanted to do. Anyway, whatever that you had that you wanted to engage with or get out of Japanese, you don't need to, but maybe you'll naturally be able to. But practically, if you want to get fluent, whatever that means, and I think for a lot of people, fluent means express all the thoughts and ideas I normally would have, but in Japanese. But the thing is, the more interest, hobbies, whatever you have, the more vocab you have to learn. And so for me, I found
magic.
Pragmatically speaking, what it means like after the N1 is for every single interest and every aspect of that interest, you need to re-engage with it in a natural context in Japanese. And that is a Herculean amount of work. So like every end like is if somebody's talking about the Philippines, what's the words for the Philippines? If you're talking about California, you have to know the katakana pronunciation of California. If you are playing Gloomhaven, the Gloomhaven like a really big board game, what are all the specific terms that you're going to encounter in a setting like that? If you're playing like a TTRPG like Dungeons and Dragons in Japanese, you have to realize that it's actually Call of Cthulhu.
そういうゲームっていうのかな。
I'm just talking about games. We can expand other stuff.
そういう系のさ、日本語って正直私も全然理解できない。
No, this is the thing about fluency, though. I'm saying is I think when people okay, how would you frame fluency with English? Like when for one, do you consider yourself fluent in English?
日常会話をスラスラできるじゃないかな。
Okay, you're way too modest. Your Japanese self is you're more fluent than that. Okay. But I'm saying that's would you say generally maybe I think it's because you don't have
わかった。でもビジネスフルエンシーってなると、そのビジネスのシチュエーションで敬語とかもいろいろあるじゃん。なんかそこも全部できますよね。
Would you like let me put it this way. Do you have any goals that you want to achieve or have not been able to achieve with your English yet that you still have in your mind?
私結構あれかもな。日常生活を違う国で、2ヶ月以上したことなくて。 違うわ。1ヶ月以上か。多分1ヶ月がマックスかもしれない。だから1ヶ月以上したことなくて、普通のお店に入ってレストランでとか、そういう時のオーダーの仕方とか、なんかそういう系は、でも全然まだダメだから、そこはフルエントではないと思う。
Just random.
とか、携帯の契約とかさ。
So this is kind of what I'm okay. So you're kind of going around, and so why do you think that doing a phone contract is something that falls under fluency?
それは、だって普通のネイティブ、まあ地元民だったら当然できるはずじゃん。
Okay, let me
so
ask you a question then. So in Okinawa, I think I've mentioned on the podcast just because it blew my mind. But I've met Okinawan people who don't know what the Nintendo Switch is, and they don't know what karuta is. Would you say that a Japanese person who doesn't know what karuta is and doesn't know what Nintendo Switch is not fluent? Would you say that a Japanese person?
それはまた違うじゃん。それは存在を知らないだけでさ。
No, but why, why, okay, but because they don't know the sonzai, they also probably don't know all the related terminology to video games. No, you know like video game terminology, like game terminology. You could talk about Legend of Zelda. This person couldn't talk about any of that. So are they not fluent?
それとまた契約は違くない？
Why is a phone contract more relevant in one's daily life than...
だってその携帯の契約は実際に誰かと喋って、で、どういう言い回しで言えばいいかとかじゃん。でもそのゲームとかってパッシブじゃん。だし、別に存在を知らないわけよっていうことがフルエントじゃないっていうわけじゃなくない？
Well, if you don't have any of the associated terminology, then you're not be able to express your... Like, if you don't understand anything about the topic, you're not going to be able to express almost anything about the topic. And so I'm talking about in terms of phone contracts, like, I don't see why you're for example, when I was growing up, your whole idea of talking about phone contracts being related to fluency sounds ridiculous. I didn't have a phone. So was I not fluent when I was, before everybody had a phone, was I not fluent in English? You know what I'm saying? Like, when I was a 12-year-old, was I fluent in English or not fluent in English? Because I didn't know anything about phone contracts.
分かった。じゃあそのシチュエーションだとさ、まだね、フォンは relevant じゃないから、知りませんよだし、あと、まあ、子供だから契約はできないよね。
Okay, well, that's not really... Well, my main point is, I think you're kind of saying what I'm saying is people have a list of things in their head that, hey, I could do this in... You're saying you're talking about what the other natives can do. But you're really talking about your perception of what natives do. So I think that's one way to think about it, is what could a native do? Can I do what a native speaker could do? But then the other perceptions, I guess, for me, I think this is how I think about it, is all the things I want to normally express, can I express them in Japanese? And I'm saying that's why from my perspective... but I also add, in addition to that, in my head mentally, now I'm thinking about it, I also add, as well as something the average Japanese person would know. In my head, I guess I kind of elevate... I'm just being honest. I think I elevate what the average Japanese person's level of Japanese and knowledge is because I've met some people who just don't know anything about Japanese culture, history, or anything, and it blows my mind. I'm like, what have you been doing? Like, it's like told the person I lived in Kyoto, but never left, only took one direct route to school back and forth until college and never explored a single location and didn't know anything about any of the temples.
Just being autistic.
No, I don't think the person was autistic. I don't know what was going on there. But I'm saying for me, and I think for many people, the N1 journey is like to actually achieve what's in your head fluency. It's like, oh, I need to know about how to talk about Camp Laszlo, which is a random Cartoon Network show from like the mid-2000s. Because I can talk about Camp Laszlo in English. I can talk about Chowder, another show, in English. I can talk about Ultimate Muscle, which is a show, Kinnikuman, in Japanese. Or like, it encompasses all of that. And you need to actually have just consuming content about, like, a lot of that content isn't going to exist. Or for example, like I recently saw the Bobo live show, and given how important Bobo to me, being able to talk about Bobo in Japanese and know all the characters' names and know that Gasser isn't Gasser, but he's actually Hippokomaru or something like that, is something that is in my head as part of fluency. And what I'm saying is at the N1 level, that is where, like, for one, hopefully I'm demonstrating how, like, gargantuan I think, and maybe you can tell me if this isn't how you think about fluency, but I think a lot of people do. They go, I could say this in English, I can't say it in Japanese, I'm not fluent in Japanese yet. But then you realize, like, oh gosh, like, maybe if you're a really boring person, then it's easier, is I guess what I'm saying. But if you want to, like, right now I'm wearing Warhammer, and unfortunately I ordered this set, that it was the English version. I'm like, bro, I don't want the English version of Warhammer. like there's more English content online. I'm already going to be able to learn the English content naturally by listening to that content because there's more English content. I want the Japanese manual so I can explain how to play Warhammer to Japanese people and get them into Warhammer. But anyways, aside from this, the other thing I want to talk about is when you hit the N1 level or that level in Japanese, it goes from being able to be understood, like to express what you're saying and be understood, to, I mean, at least for me, trying to like go through interactions as smoothly as a normal Japanese person would. And I think that's the other gargantuan barrier. And it doesn't necessarily mean in the same way, but I think this is what you're talking about, the phone contracts. Like if there's a problem, I'm like, okay, yesterday I lost my credit card. I found my credit card. But it's like, can you, without any issues or problems, speak to the train attendant and get them to understand, or speak to the police and get them to, understand. Obviously you can convey it.
それもフルエンシーだよね。
Yeah. And what I'm saying is, I think for a lot of people, like, and it really depends on what people's perceptions are, but doing so in a way that is just as smooth as a native speaker, not just ignoring pronunciation, but I think in a lot of people is in their brain is like what it means in fluency. And I think a lot of the N1 journey is all about that minor nuance. Like I said, I think for you, you're saying you're having the goal of wanting to go abroad and live for more than a month. But I'm saying, the last thing I want to mention before, because before the seconds get too long, is I do also include stuff that a native speaker could do that in my head, the average native speaker. So like, well, yeah, no, it's like a weird concept, but I'm saying like, for example, like maybe the average Japanese person hasn't been to Kabuki. I don't know. Or they don't know anything about Kabuki. But in my head, I'm like, it's part of Japanese history. So.
いや、でも私さ、歌舞伎行った時に全然理解できなくて、existential crisis になったから、ね。じゃあ私はネイティブじゃないのってなる。
Yeah, exactly. So I'm saying I realize that my idea of the average native Japanese is actually way, I think, higher than it is. But I'm saying like there are plenty of people like for like Rakugo. I'm seeing a Rakugo performance, I think this week. Yeah, this week, which I'm excited about. But in my head, I'm like, no, Rakugo, Kabuki, what else? Takarazuka. Like all are formed in like there's a person you'd meet who go, oh no, that's atarimai. That's josuke. Like if you don't know anything about that, you don't know, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, but anyway, let us know your thoughts about where you would mark fluency, as well as I don't know if there's any, I don't like, obviously if you're N1, if you're already at the N1 level, this podcast might not even be for you. You might be, just engaging with Japanese whatever way you want. But for more, if there are many more advanced learners or just in general, people trying to like reach the N1 goal, I'd be very interested to hear your language learning. And thank you for, what's it called? The channel name is different from the Discord name, but the channel name, Region Unlocks, releasing the video that you did because it made me think about all these different things. And we're back with the final section. And if you made it to the final section, you just send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com with a comment, question, language related, and or otherwise. And apologies to our longtime middle section enjoyer here that we have not had a middle section in quite a while. But here's the comment from this person, and it goes as follows. This is from Anne Tran. I'm not sure if I'm reading that properly. Hola, Joey and Aimi, longtime middle section enjoyer here. I've been thinking more and more about this topic of belonging since Aimi's last visit to Taiwan, but it was the synchronicity of this episode's topic that made me reach out. My roots are Vietnamese, but growing up, I moved to a different country every other year or so. When I was younger, having to answer the simple question of, oh, where are you from? With every new introduction always induced a sense of nostalgia for something I wasn't quite sure I had. It was honestly distressing at times. I heard and spoke several languages growing up, celebrated 3 different New Years, and feasted or fasted depending on the culture I was a part of. I ate, slept, and learned in all of these places. I'm now nearing 10 years in NYC, which is the longest time I've ever been in a single country. But it seems like every corner I look at, people are building up their own walls. Some days it's impossible to sense a warmth of belonging. But some days the Knicks will bring in one of the greatest NBA runs of all time, shaking up the entire city with a resonant energy. In these last few weeks, everyone here belonged. Everyone a New Yorker. I witnessed subway workers high-fiving passengers as the metro took off, saw drunk Chinese students try to teach a group of Dominicans how to say Knicks in 4, and felt in myself a pride of having been. Taiwan might not have been where you first learned to ride a bike. Panama probably didn't have magic, but in each of us exist all these unique pinches of flavor from all the cultures and customs that have come before us. Maybe it was having to learn onyomi a bit earlier than all your friends. Maybe it was getting used to layovers in the Southwest. I hope you both feel proud of these parts in you. You've earned it and cook with it your own place of belonging. いい場所は自分の中から始まると思います. Thanks for all you do. Antron. Thank you for the very long comment. I'm not sure. Do you have any initial thoughts reading that?
まあそうね。まあこっちに来てから、まあ毎回、ほぼほぼ毎回言わないといけないのが、まあ初めて会うね、人に対して、まあ、だいたい全部ね、ラフトゥーなんだけど、自分の名前言うじゃん、なんとかですって言って、どちら出身って言われて、で、まあ普通に、ね、何々県ですって言って。でもまだね、ちょっと、その地域だと、そのね、名字の名前は結構いるのみたいな感じで言われて、全然いないです。で、ストーリー、ね、バックストーリーがちょっと始まるんだけど、みたいな。おじいちゃんおばあちゃんが電話で、みたいな感じで言わなくちゃいけなくて、まあ、この話も何回もしてると思うけど、なんだろうね、じゃあこれが例えばね、まあ、佐藤だったらね、佐藤ですって言ったら、別に、どこ出身とかいう気は聞かれると思うけど、追加で別に、佐藤はですね、みたいな、戦国時代のなんたらかんたらでとかって別に言わなくていいじゃん。
Yeah, you're making me think of something, I mean, when I read this comment and now that you're saying it, which is like, two things, cultural signaling and code switching. And although I am, in terms of my eternal self-identity, I definitely think I carry a lot of aspects from all the places I've engaged with, including, Japan, not just places that are related to either my name or my culture necessarily. But realistically speaking, when I engage with people, there's not only linguistic code switching. You know what code switching is, right? When you're speaking like in a different way than you are to suit the environment you're in. And so a lot of code switching is happens like I think that word might even come from like AAVE, African American vernacular. Like somebody would speak with their family in one way using, one dialect of English. But when we're speaking normal person, they'll use their white voice. Like, hello, everybody, and how nice to meet you. But normally that's not how they'd speak with their friends. It's called code switching. And I don't know in Japanese what that would be. The closest thing would probably be like using kansai ben at the home, but then using hyojungo when speaking to friends outside of the home, if that makes any sense. Who you know don't speak it. But I think realistically what happens to some degrees, obviously there's portions of your personality and like your upbringing and experience that you can't fully hide. But if I'm like, I'm always very conscious of like, if I go to like, I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking this, but this is just go through my head. I'm at a supermarket. If I buy nachos and I look brown, then I'm signaling I'm Hispanic, and maybe the Japanese person I'm around, maybe they slightly think, another foreigner, you're not getting rice. You should be getting rice. Why are you not getting rice? If you don't like Japan, you can go back to your own. I'm not even kidding. This is the thoughts that go to my head. I'm like, is what I've purchased too non-Japanese? Like to what degree, because you're saying to some degree, I think you need to expose other, people need exposure to other cultures and, countries and influence to be less bigoted. But at the same time, when you're trying to make a friend or an acquaintance, there's a degree of like cultural self-regulation that at least I do. I just do it. Where I'm like, is the clothing. Like I brought these, I can show you these shoes called kutaras, which is like a Panamanian like sandals, which I love. And in Okinawan heat, they're fantastic because it rains and it doesn't matter if they get wet. But I'm aware every time I wear kutaras, they're sort of they're very unique. They're actually unique in the way they look, but to a person who's not really knowing what to look for, they might just look like, I'm just being honest. If somebody, they might think, oh, those are poor person sandals. It's something that some Japanese person might be thinking. And so I'm aware every time I put them on, especially being brown, that they're probably thinking, oh, those Muslims coming into, I don't know if the Japanese people think, but I think there's probably a non-zero amount of Japanese people thinking, oh, that African, I don't know if they're thinking African, well, wearing that, why is he not wearing shoes? Disgusting. And so I don't know, obviously with you, you're born and raised in Japan. So Do any of these, do you relate to this at all? I don't know. Do you even think about these things? Like, I'm not kidding. On a daily basis, these are the thoughts. I'm like, is the way I'm walking, is it too American? Am I holding my posture up too high? Do I
日
look...
本に住んでて、日本人を意識しながら生きてる
This, in your case, would probably be hiding your... You do a little... Hiding your American influence, your English influence, and hiding your Taiwanese influence. I'm saying...
I can't hide my Taiwanese influence じゃない。
You have some
だってもう
exposure...
名前とか、なんかちょっと。
Well, it's not a name, but I'm saying there's stuff outside of your name, like some of the food preferences you have from like...
確かにあんま白米は好きではないけど、なんかよくご飯で白米ね。食べないから、なんでみたいな言われて、別に普通に眠くなるから、みたいな感じで言って、じゃあ。
That's such a scientific, because there's actually, I think, too much, there's more sugar in there, so...
いや、普通にそうなんだけど、じゃあなんかあんまり日本食あれなんだね、みたいな感じで、いや別に日本食は好きだけど、みたいな。
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good idea. Like, the generalizing the entire, but obviously I know this might not be really, I'm just giving you that idea.
とか、そうだ、あとなんか普通に沖縄、日差しが強すぎて、なんかサングラスかけてると、なんかアメリカンだね、みたいな。
Oh, that's interesting. Oh yeah, another one actually that I used to think more about, but it really depends I don't really carry water bottle with me as much in Japan unless I'm biking, but I'm also aware of that. If I wear a big backpack, I'm signaling I'm American. If I have a water bottle, I'm signaling I'm American. And I'm aware of the stereotypes and the other stuff. Obviously, I'm aware of, like, with every piece of clothing and every purchase I make and every decision I make, that I'm sending out cultural signals. And maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but this is what's going through my head. And with every engagement, it's like, is this person somebody that I think could be my friend? And if they are somebody who can be a friend, what is the correct amount of not Japanese signaling that I'm allowed to do to still get close to them, but without making them think, this person's not trying to engage with Japan, if that makes any sense. I don't, yeah. But
まあ、そうだね。まあ。
Does it surprise you to hear that this is the level of stuff going through my head when I'm engaging?
なんだろう、私、ちっちゃい時とかは、よく、my dad が、ちょっと台湾ニーズ、結構喋る人で、なんていうの、家族とかでどっか行った時に、台湾語話さないようにしてね、みたいな。とかあったし。
Yeah, that's like the Japanese, what's called, food system.
そう。だから、とかもあったからね。
Yeah. But I guess what I'm saying is there's an interesting thing which is like, what if, as somebody who has multiple influences and changes based on the environment to some degree, the question I'm now thinking is like, well, what is actually me? Like, what is the core of me that does not change, that I'm trying to authentically represent here? Because obviously you're saying, I do think that exists somewhere, but it can be hard to know the lines of that. And I'm, at least in all my interactions, I'm not trying to erase my cultural influences. I think, realistically, I'm trying to Machiavellianly, like, just achieve whatever goal I am in any given context. And sometimes that involves, I don't know if just code switching is correct. I think the other thing's more accurate, because it'd be like, oh, I would normally pick up Doritos in the supermarket, but I'm not going to pick up Doritos in the supermarket, because if I pick up Doritos and also get a hamburger, they're going to be that filthy American. He's not eating any Japanese, our beautiful Japanese rice. And if I get the rice, they're probably thinking he's making the price of a rice go up. Maybe it's a lose-lose. But anyways, I thought of all these things when reading your email. So thank you for the comment. That bell means we've reached the end of today's episode. Thanks for joining us on the lazy conversation towards fluency. If you have any language-related questions and are just looking for general advice, send an email to lazyfluency@gmail.com and you might respond in the next episode. Also, consider supporting us on Ko-Fi to get video updates, Discord access, and or just lend a hand. And finally, make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. We'd appreciate the support. This has been Joey.
And Yami.
Signing off.
じゃあねー。